scandal as it happened, how many Kenyans do you think were potentially affected? Because in the screening we saw some countries were highlighted, Kenya, Ghana, Kenya being one of them. So is there an estimate number that you would have that you could say were potentially affected? Let's start with Duncan.
Thank you for this. Generally, I don't. The numbers are not quite like it's a bit scanty. What happened during that period?
Any comment from Laibuta or Grace? If you can put a number to it, a rough estimate. No, good. And then, where does Kenya currently stand with efforts towards data privacy? I think here is where we would have the discussion around the Data Protection Bill. What's currently the state of data protection and data privacy laws in Kenya? So, how far is this Data Protection Bill? It has just been passed. I think today we saw in the media there are some people who are challenging it, right? So, what's the current state of data protection and privacy laws in Kenya?
We have an act that's supposed to start operations on the 25th. Though it's been challenged in court for several issues, one that did not go through Senate. There's also a challenge on the content of the bill, how the data commissioner is being appointed, and that is not independent as drafted. But I think there's also the issue of national security issues that are there are quite vague. But already there's an act that is in place from 25th. It starts to operate.
Okay, and as it is right now, would you say we should look at challenging it, or should just go with it the way it is right now and work on fixing it in the future?
There have been several bills. It was amended post-2010 after the Constitution. There was another bill that has been regurgitated over and over again with basically 80% of the same content. There have also been several court cases on issues to deal with privacy. One was to challenge, there was a program that to look at which phones are fake, which are not, IME numbers, and that was challenged and it was successful. There was also a challenge on privacy when there was an executive order that children living with HIV should be registered. There should be a register. So there's an NGO called Kelin that challenged that, and they were successful. There's also been another case that dealt with health issues. So there was a gentleman who challenged the Aga Khan hospital that they shared his medical data with a third party without his knowledge. So he also won that petition on the grounds that it breached doctor-patient confidentiality, and this person had not given his consent for his information to be shared out there. So there have been a lot of cases and incidences that is in the courts that have dealt with issues of data protection. About the content, Grace, I think, has been intimately involved in this, and she'll talk about her experience. But my experience, I don't represent any organization, so I've just been giving my views on my blog and attending sessions in Parliament once in a while. Is that what we have now, to a certain extent, makes sense to me. In that, one, it provides for an independent body to regulate issues to do with data protection. Then it provides for rights, individual rights. What are your rights when in relation to your personal data? It even goes to issues of special data that is special, like health data, your religion, etc. It provides for remedies. It provides responsibility for data processors, data controllers. There's a dispute resolution process. There are fines. The fines, I think, are too modest when you're dealing with some of the big boys and girls who deal with data. But for anybody who wants to challenge, I mean, it's their constitutional rights. But in my view, it's a good start from what we've had before.
I'd like to ask Anthony and Grace, maybe just to highlight some key interesting points from the Data Protection Act in relation to data protection and data privacy. Just 2 or 3 things that we found very interesting that people should know about.
The Data Protection Act is almost a copy-paste of what they have in Europe, which is called GDPR. There's a lot that has been borrowed from there. So, for example, they have put out these principles. I think there are 8 or 9 of them that state how anybody who collects a lot of data is supposed to collect it. First of all, they have to have a legitimate reason. Like you can't just go collecting people's data, even you AI Kenya. You have to explain to people why you're collecting their data. You can't keep it forever. There's a time limitation. You have to destroy it after some time. You can't repurpose it without explaining to the people you collected it from and seeking their consent. There's the issue of consent. You need people's consent, and it has to be explained to them so that they give it willingly. And many, many more. I'd encourage you to read section 25 because it's written in very simple, at least that part is written in very simple language that any Kenyan can understand. Any Kenyan who understands English can understand. When it comes to the actual practice, it's something to watch. People need a lot of awareness. We need to create awareness from maybe all the people who collect our data, the security companies. We need to create awareness and to tell them that it's no longer allowed in law. People need to go across and tell help that they can't go publishing people's private information in newspapers and so on and so forth. So awareness will be a key thing in order for us to realize.
So very quickly, with the recent Huduma number and census collection exercise, what would you say? Would you say the data collection process was sort of to book, or were there very many loopholes that we could highlight and sort of ways of improvement moving forward? This goes to all of you, so you can just pick it up very briefly.
Okay, regarding the recently Huduma number, so there are some issues around how these what this data collection process was for, and the organizations behind what are the applications that were going to be used behind, such as some notable companies like MasterCard were mentioned, and so that was one, and in the recently concluded census, there were some questions such as some personal identifiable questions like what's your ID, and Amnesty International came forward and asked citizens not to provide these, and that it was optional, and the back and forth of like if you don't answer even questions to the enumerators, you're going to be fined, and so there was sort of like questions around that specifically.
There's been a court case, of course, that challenged the Huduma number registration, and then of course the court gave certain orders that it was not a compulsory process, that also need to review the issues of whether now whether this can go on without a Data Protection Act. Now we have a Data Protection Law. But my biggest issue was that this was a framework that's devoid of policy and law. So the government comes and says, you all need to register for Huduma number. It's an executive order, you must all do it. And there are a lot of threats all over the place. But when you analyze, there are many countries that have undergone similar. If you look at Scandinavia, if you look at Japan, they have similar processes where they register people, they get all this biodata, and this data is used for provision of certain services. But when you look at those jurisdictions, they have very clear outlines within their law and their policy what this data is going to be used for. Who is collecting the data, why, when, what if there's a data breach? So the issue of the data security is very clear, and these are communities where there's a lot of trust, like Kenya here, where you hear a lot of times you hear that, for example, you hear that data relating to elections, the register, has been sold. So if you're in a certain constituency, you find you're receiving texts from people you don't know. So you're wondering, how does this person know I'm from this ward or I'm... So in Kenya, we do not have that kind of responsibility with the data that we have. We've also had that there are certain public state data like relating to NHIF and SSF that it's out there. Whether it's out there, whether it's not, we've had telcos, serious breach, and there are court cases where people have actually quote unquote stolen data from telcos and they are selling it in the black market. So we're in an environment where we really have no kind of culture for trust with information that is entrusted to us. That is why it is very important that we have a very clear regulatory mechanism that deals with data. Who is collecting this data? For what reason? Is collecting from whom? For what period of time? What if somebody has a complaint? What if there's a breach? Because without this, if there's a data breach, for example, issues of impersonation, people are being impersonated all over the place, or the committee text, which I think everybody, or sometimes, and I give this example, for example, and this happens a lot to ladies. You go to somewhere, you sign in either in a hotel or somewhere, and you give your details. Then way later, somebody is texting you and saying, "Hey, me, I'm so and so, the one who was there at the signing desk." So this is misuse of
this. We don't collect people's personal numbers.
So I'm just giving this to show examples that really we Kenyans, we cannot trust ourselves with data. We have exhibited, the state has used data for surveillance. Private companies are using, for example, sometimes you pay with M-Pesa in an establishment and you get text messages over and over again. So these are issues that a lot of people say, no, we can't operate this way. We need this law. And as they say, it needs to go further than just this Data Protection Act.
Now, just bring it back to the role of artificial intelligence and machine learning and data science. So, Anthony, what would you say is artificial intelligence role in all this? So, does it have a capability to enhance data privacy, or is it doing the deterioration of it?
Yeah. So, in my view, in the documentary you saw, they had almost 50,000 data points, and in general, like in the basic definition of machine learning, you write the program to solve the problem by example. You don't have to go the roots. So the more the data that you have, the more accurate it gets. So in terms of like when you're scrolling through the news feed, the more data points it has on you, the better news feed you get. If you're watching a streaming service, the more data points they have on you, the better videos they can recommend. The same as listening, the Spotify's and the likes. So it's more what can the enactors, the people who partake in machine learning and artificial intelligence, what can they do on their part to ensure that they use what's necessary. So if it's anonymizing the data from the source, if it's like doing the analysis from the source without generally having to take it from the individuals themselves, and just in the skills, just use data that's not identifiable to a specific person, just use the attributes that are research driven and not contravening the privacy of certain individuals.
Okay. Anything to add on that, Chris?
So me, I'm a humanist. I think there's a lot of techno-optimism and solutionism, especially being driven here in Africa. I think one of the best arguments I had against Huduma number was from an ordinary person who probably has no idea of what machine learning is, but this person asked, and please translate for your neighbor if they don't understand Swahili, but this person asked, kama wajakuwa kinipatia huduma saa hii yote, hii namba ndio itanipatia huduma. Yeah, so I am of the school of thought that we need to solve our human problems, and technology is just a tool that we can leverage on, but we can't. It can't solve everything. I think what worries me most about this movie, or what one of the most striking things for me was, oh, look at these people acting like the world is falling apart. We have been divided along identity lines without any machine. Our human problem in Kenyan politics has been identity politics before any machine came to learn us and further divide us, isn't it? And so I think we still need like human aspects in artificial intelligence. I think data scientists need to also become social scientists and understand society. And social scientists also need to understand what these people are cooking in the labs, so that we can have a more holistic approach to problems. But let nobody imagine that technology, including Huduma number, is this one big magic bullet. Is it called magic or silver? Oh, okay, I don't know so much about warfare. Is this thing that will come to solve all our problems that we've had before? I don't think so. I think it's a layered problem.
So rounding up, what options do citizens and users have to stay afloat of any possible data privacy breaches, given that we are mostly served by international companies and even some local companies? So are there some tools or are there some recommended sort of frameworks that people can pick up to stay afloat of data privacy breaches?
I think, have you ever heard of the first year where you make a pact with the devil? So that you tell the devil now, no, let me agree. But this one we are saying years later. Because this technology and the data we give, for example, let me just give a simple example. If you use Gmail, you can't survive without Gmail. And if you're in Android, you can't be on Android without Gmail. Right? Then, of course, when you look at tools like Facebook, there are a lot of people, especially young people, who are doing business on Facebook, on IG, on Twitter. And it is inevitable that you will give a lot of data every day. Let's take, for example, somebody who bakes cakes, for example. This person will give their info, they will open an IG page. Of course, perhaps there will be a phone number there because they have to order this cake. There are people who will interact with them when all this data is being collected. What option does this person have? To do leaflets around Nairobi University that I'm saying. This is what I'm calling doing the pact with the devil. Because there's not, let's look at Facebook. When Facebook started, a lot of us interacted with people who were with in primary school or pre-primary. If it was not for that, you wouldn't have done it. It's just a fact. This documentary was about politics. A lot of political issues in Kenya, some kind of solutions have come from social media. Let's look, remember, I can give a few examples. You remember the woman who was raped in a matatu? The people were convicted because this was shared on social media. Remember the woman, I think it was in Wajir, who was stabbed by her husband, it was in the jeep. How did she get a solution? Because of social media. This week, or this last week, a JCOT student was being clobbered by police. How was a solution found? Someone posted this, put it on social media, it went viral, and there was a reaction. So for you, if you look at the end of the day, it's not that it's inevitable, but it also depends what kind of information we put out there. Because what Cambridge Analytica and a lot of the data points is what we call the There's this writer called Shoshana Zuboff, I hope I say that right. She talks about data exhausts. Just like footprints, wherever you walk, you're leaving some kind of traces. And that's what happens on the internet. That whatever we do, we leave, like I'm here, of course, I'm sure Google will tell me, how did you like Alliance? Right? Did you like it? Did you not like it? You have a photo to share. So there have been a lot of things that I've been reading about how we can minimize the kind of information we share, but which is hard because you want to give a selfie when you're there. Perhaps you're in church or you're with your relative, you're in church. So, in my view, what we really need is proper regulation because, for one, these international companies are not regulated in Kenya. That's why when you saw the ICO, the Information Commissioner of the UK, that commissioner took action against Cambridge Analytica. When David said, I need my data, and they were given a deadline. In Kenya you can't, so who do you go to say that? It is because the Data Protection Act in the UK, even before GDPR, they had a Data Protection Act way before the GDPR. Now they have a GDPR and they have this informational commissioner. So there's something. There were hearings within the parliament in the UK, Congress in the US, because there are specific laws that provide for this kind of situation, which we don't have. For example, it was said Cambridge Analytica worked for the current president in Kenya. Do you expect them to investigate Cambridge Analytica in an environment that does not have any law to deal with data protection? The answer is no. But where there's a clear law, there's a clear regulation, if this happens, if this happens, then lastly, in terms of politics, when you look at that, politics and social media, Grace said our politics is local. For example, if you head to Uhuru Kenyatta, no clip of Cambridge Analytica will make you vote for Uhuru Kenyatta. None whatsoever. If you head Raila Odinga, even if they bring how much vote, your mind is already set to your vote. Because what she said, try vote. So the translation, and that's when Angela Nyabola, I think she's written a book, Digital Democracy, Analog Politics. That a lot of our politics, some things we do, but they're not translated on the ground. And like where you had, like in Tunisia, what happened on social media translated to the ground. So who here voted because they saw a Cambridge Analytica video saying that Raila is so and so or Uhuru is so and so? None of us. So clear policy, clear regulations to deal with this. And of course, they also need to be, for example, the culture of surveillance capitalism started with Google. When Google realized, there's data around here that we can play around with and sell. So it's also about corporate responsibility. And no company out of their own volition will undertake this corporate responsibility without any law.
Okay. So just to finish, are there any tools that, contrary to his opinion, are there any tools that people can still use to monitor data privacy breaches online? In terms of the email, phone number, and so on.
Okay, there are all those, I'm sure if you go online to spaces like CIPIT.org, you'll find these toolkits that tell you which browsers to use and so on and so forth. That's at an individual level. Collectively, I think people need to make noise, especially you middle class people who have access to the internet and therefore access to your leaders who are online. You need to bring these things to the fore in a collective way. I think it's really, really difficult for, especially in this environment, as Laibuta said, it's really difficult to get action, but collectively, if people are complaining about a breach of privacy, or if people are just, sharing or showing how they are getting SMSs after visiting a certain place or after, engaging with a certain product. I think that brings faster results, and it gets companies to be more sensitive to their data practices. So I hope to see a lot more of that. I hope that Radio Jambo, Patanisho, people will be talking about. It's true. That we get to talk about what privacy means in a very rudimentary way for people even in the villages to understand how not to breach people's privacy.
So,
I'll just be brief. The average in our day-to-day browsing habits, in around IBM research that was done showed that the average person leaves 400 megabytes of digital footprint in a day. So again, to add on to, we don't have a choice because, like you said, you have that online shop that you want to drive traffic towards. So it's more of like being aware now that we know it's out there, and perhaps just taking some conscientious efforts in just limiting how much footprint we leave. So if it's if Facebook themselves have come out and said, hey, we can show you what we have on you. On Google Chrome you can do that as well, and just see a string of your digital footprint in history. I was surprised mine went back as far as 6 months and beyond. And in terms of like monitoring our online use and being cognizant of what's what. Like for instance, if you saw in that documentary, the way they collected all that data was through a Facebook app that would ask you personality questions. So I'm sure some of us in the audience have seen Facebook quizzes like, this is how my child is going to look like, and this is how it look like if I in the front page of this magazine. So they tend to like sometimes transcend, and even logging in with Facebook, logging in with Google, they sniff some information about you. So just being cognizant and being aware, reading the privacy policy, like this app that came out, the face app that made you, face app? Yeah, that made you look old. In the privacy, if you read, there's a caveat like you are giving your face publicly, and it's stored, and all those people who participated have their faces stored in a server somewhere in Russia. So that's something I just wanted to follow.
Okay, I think that wraps up the session for now. So now I'd like to give it to you guys to ask questions.
How do we involve an interdisciplinary approach in also framing the language that we use to create awareness or to build consensus and allies when we talk about digital rights and digital cultures?
Two quick questions. The first is on the Act itself. If there are particular areas that you could point out to the audience that maybe are worth further scrutiny and probing in as far as, I guess, our trust for the government implementing it as it should be. One of the areas that caught my eye was around the overrides around national security that can be taken to kind of circumvent everything that's in the Act itself. So just curious your point of view there. And then secondly, on a technology front, are there particular use cases that AI could be used for in terms of predicting or prescribing things as it relates to privacy?
Well, I don't think digital issues belong to any particular space. They're so cross-cutting that, for example, even one of the tensions in the Data Protection Act is that law enforcement has a lot of interest, and it has become security. Huduma number, which would basically have been something more to do with the population register, which is normally matters of planning, has also become securitized and is now, like, you know, every database has now gone to the Ministry of Security, Interior and Coordination of, like, what is Homeland Security. So now, where we are in the world right now, I don't think anything belongs specifically only to one discipline. And so I totally agree with you that there is a need for more, what is it called, dialogue across disciplines so that we can borrow from each other. And there are so many intersections that, for example, in this matters of privacy and data protection, people say that one of the easiest ways to make people understand is that we have to go back to folklore, we have to go back to like simple stories and talk about things like spirits, because how do you explain to people, like your people back in Shads, that even right now there's somebody who knows what they're doing, that if they have a smartphone, it knows their movements, you know, the body sensor functionality. How do you explain to them if you can't borrow from language like there's a spirit who sees the invisible, you know, and stuff like that. So I don't have a proper answer to your question, but I do definitely agree that there's a need to for an interdisciplinary approach.
Any other thing before I move to the next question?
On that, I'll just say rights that apply offline also apply online. That is the simple principle. This national security issue has been a problem. Remember, even in 2009, 2010, in the Constitution, there's that issue that security had been placed within the draft Constitution, and it was a big crisis. Because the Act actually does not define what is public interest. So I find that quite what is public interest? So that will be problematic, what amounts to national security, because Huduma said it was part of national security, etc. So I don't know, so I think that will be problematic. Another problematic issue that I said is the fines. You find some of our tech companies 5 million shillings, surely. That is money for tea for 1 hour in that establishment. So there's no punitive effect to that. Then lastly, what Kikuna asked on the issues of algorithm. There are certain initiatives. There's one initiative, one is ethical coding. I don't know if the coders here, you've heard about that. So there's a lot of discussions in many research institutes about ethical coding, whereby you code, the person coding ensures that whatever that code will do, I'm not a techie, but it says whatever that code will do is ethical and legal. So you're not coding for an illegal purpose or for a purpose that is against the law. You get what I'm saying? So there's that aspect. Then secondly, because I work with private entities, and there's the issue of designing for privacy. So if you're designing an algorithm, if you're designing a system, it is designed with privacy as a basic principle, with data protection as a basic principle. So if you're designing a code that, for example, collects data, is it automatically designed to protect one in terms of security and the protection in that it's all how it will work, how you will run that code, that basically the principles of consent, the principle of processing for the correct purpose, etc., the storage, the security. So there are those two principles: ethical coding and designing with privacy as a main principle in the design.
Okay, and then Anthony, I think this one is for you. Some use cases.
Just to add on to, I think one big question I've had, every lawyer who's looked at that act, is that the drafting was a bit lacking. So there is probably going to be a lot of cases on splitting hairs, because sometimes it says any person, sometimes it says a person, which can become a really big deal in law. There's also the issue of children. the Act provides that children are to be protected specially, and then it says that the data controller or processor has to ascertain the age of whoever is using data that they are collecting. For platforms like Google and Facebook, I think that's going to be a really difficult thing to do because I don't think they've collected enough. They fed their AI enough for their AI to be able to tell that this is a child and this is an adult. So I think that's going to be another issue. And then, of course, I can't belabor the point, but I think the fact that issues like national security, I think KRA is also really interested in data, and they're going to they're trying to find ways to legitimize them checking every database for purposes of taxes and revenue collection. I think that will definitely find its way in court because people are going to resist that kind of, because I mean, a Data Protection Act is supposed to protect our privacy, not to make the work of government agencies easier. Yeah.
Anthony, very quickly, use cases for your own privacy, if you have any.
Yeah, so generally, if you're doing something that implementing an AI process that you definitely, to some extent, require some data points on a given individual. So let's say if it's credit scoring, so definitely there's some information that they would require in order to generate the score. If it's maybe health monitoring and the likes, that's a given. There's something that that it may be required. But in the largest sense, there's usually a scale of privacy. So something like your name, your address, where you live, and going forward to things like what your phone number, and going into some other general attributes such as gender, male, etc. So it's more of the people doing practicing AI just working their ways into the less sensitive attributes, so that not to contravene the most sensitive information. So if they can work, if an AI process can work without going into the personal details, then that's a given. If it needs to, then it's quite broad in that sense.
We're highly dependent on, let's say, the big companies, so for sometimes towards how they contribute to our economy and the development in general. So, for example, whenever you're buying a SIM card, you normally have to agree to things like the terms and conditions. But most of the time, 90-25% of us won't even go through them because they're normally lengthy. So do you think that's a way of those companies making us not go through them, or can it be done in a simpler way? Because even if we agree to something and I come to deny it later, they'll say I agreed to it in the past. Then in that they contribute to our economy, a big chunk of our economy. We can't do like the US and just say like we are going to ban all of our wage devices in Kenya because it will affect us greatly. Do you think we have a chance of fighting against such companies when they want to collect our data? Thank you.
So I think Mugambi can take the first one around the deletion of data from different data handlers. Very briefly.
Okay. In the EU, there have been these cases that originated from Spain. The issue of the right to be forgotten, where somebody filed some of these cases were individuals who had criminal records way before, many years ago, decades ago, now they say this record should not be shown online. So they say, if you Google their names, you should not get this. But what the Google argued is that, this should only, of course they opposed at first that this is the right to information, that the information should be out there. But these people won on the right to be forgotten. Just that it said it has to be within the EU, the geographical area. So if you search that person in Kenya here, you will get that information. But if you search that person when you're in the EU, that information. So it's a dicey area. Also the fact that somebody says I've deleted, like if I tell you I've deleted a photo on my phone, unless you come and check yourself, and maybe I've sent to many, it's a quite tricky situation. But the fact is that now, if it is realized that this person has used data that they were not meant to use, then that brings a legal issue. In the UK, there was an issue with iPhone. And iPhone was collecting certain data sets of people without their knowledge, and they realized. And now there's a suit that is in, I think now it is in the High Court in London, and it says that the people arguing, the argument is that now, see, iPhone collected our data without our knowledge and our consent. And of course, because of the multiplicity of laws and jurisdictions, Apple were like, no, you can't ask this question in the UK. Actually, as Apple, we're in another jurisdiction. But the good thing, the Court of Appeal in London said, no. One, you have to allow these people to file a class suit. That is, all the people who feel aggrieved, we allow them to file this suit. Secondly, we allow them to serve Apple wherever they are, wherever they purport their offices are. And why was this possible? It's because the UK has a very clear law on dealing with these issues. They had their Data Protection Act way before GDPR. Now they have GDPR. So there are some remedies available to people who are aggrieved to their data being collected or processed or stored or transferred without their consent. Those are some of the mechanisms that are available. But where you have no law, no regulations, there is no recourse for you. I'm sure you're also aware that the EU has been serious fines have been imposed against Google, against Facebook. Now, all state attorneys in the US are doing an antitrust investigation against these big companies. Why? Because they have a law that provides for us. Upper Kenya, what do you do?
Okay. Chris, the next question was around the danger of breaching data privacy directly. The danger of breaching data privacy directly. I don't know if I got it right. The dangers.
Okay. I think one way or one tool that we can use is to ride on, like I like what happened with the help. When help say put up a notice that they are planning to publish all the defaulters, and everybody is telling them, you guys, there is now a data protection law, and showing them what the law says. And I saw some people even tagging DCI, which was almost hilarious. But I think it's a nice way to break it down to the people. I think there's gonna be a lot of cases involving, especially what do you call it? Which is currently suspended. These intimate partners who expose, revenge porn, expose each other's privacy out of machungu. I think there's going to be a lot of such cases, and definitely some of them are going to go so far that it's going to be a lesson to others. And sorry, on the question of other things we can use, I think I liked what he was explaining about that every time you're using digital tools, it's almost every day we live around. When you said 400 MB, I was actually translating it to that is the 7-day data bundle for Safaricom. I think that's easy for people to, and people who have to buy data bundles, that's easy for them to understand.
And then there was the question of the terms and conditions being taken advantage of, and how can we take control of that?
I think just shortly around that, there's a service online where people translate legalese to English. So they take like an entire terms and conditions of a certain application or website, and for each paragraph have like a short sentence summary. I can't remember it quite clearly, but they tended to be a bit, some of them took it too far and a bit funny, but there is some existing services around legalese to English.
Okay, I think at this point it's very clear for the panelists. So if my voice command works properly, we had a slide on some recommended readings, and one of the books that Laibuta had mentioned. So this is where the voice command should work. Next slide, and there it has worked. Yes, so there's the book by Nyabola, Digital Democracy, Analog Politics. It briefly touches on the Cambridge Analytica Scandal in Kenya. And then there's the book from Brittany Kaiser, who's the main character in the documentary. It's called Targeted. Currently reading it, and you'll be mind blown on the kind of things these people can do, especially around psychographics and micro-targeting. And then there's a book also by Christopher Wiley, which I won't read the title because you know why. Yeah, so thank you so much for coming. We had around 230 of you who were in this room, but you guys have made it up to the last point, so I think you should clap for yourselves.
Just one more book now. Look for a book called Surveillance Capitalism by Shoshana Zuboff. I think I'm saying that. If you read it, it's quite a bulky book, but it will give you the history about where all these problems started. When Microsoft started, when Google started, when Facebook started. It's called Surveillance Capitalism. If you just search book on surveillance capitalism, she was a Harvard professor, Shoshana Zuboff, and also Permanent Record by Snowden. It will make you understand why this happens and why it is almost quote-unquote impossible to stop this from happening. Thank you.
Yeah, so thank you so much for coming. I'll request to just take a group photo outside, and then you can leave at your own pleasure. Thank you.